Football in the 2000s was brilliant. We were introduced to possibly the greatest two players to ever play the game. It felt like a new team was winning the Champions League every single season. But what about the football shirts? When you look back, it was a bit of an odd era for football shirts. I'll say at the start, this isn't my favourite era of football shirts. The 90s, for me, just looking back, just is above everything else. The creativity was there, the sponsors were there, just the way they fit on the players. And I think it was starting to hit the dark age of football shirts. However, saying that, there was still some really cool designs. Right, what did they do well? The Italian League. As normal, just excluding probably the 2010s, you could argue the Italian League had the best football shirts just around, really, didn't they? I mean, to be honest, my question was answered in the 2010s, but before that, how can you manage to ruin an AC Milan shirt? It's a beautiful red and black stripes. It's just so iconic, isn't it? And that's where we have to start. The AC Milan shirt, especially in the mid-2000s. I mean, it's not a coincidence how all these teams you probably like the shirts of were doing really well at the time. AC Milan got into the Champions League final 2003, 2005, 2007. But that home and away strip in 2005, I mean, for me, it was that white away one. It was just so clean, wasn't it? Nowadays, for me, Puma AC Milan kits, they're not it, are they? They've had a couple of half decent ones, but they've really gone downhill. But when you had the Opel sponsor on the shirt, for me, the 2000s has to be the best AC Milan era of football shirts. What about Juventus though? Because if you ignore the issues they had, for me again, Juve had the best era of shirts in the 2000s. 90s and beyond, it felt a bit old-fashioned. They were still some really cool shirts, and nowadays with the badge change, it just feels a bit too polished, a bit too modern. But that period from around 2003 to about 2008, you just can't really go wrong. And again, when you think of the players, it has to be Nedved, it has to be Trezeguet, a bit of Ibrahimovic, and on this channel we love a badge in the middle. It's something that you don't see really much nowadays. A team like Wolves has it, but especially in the 90s, that was a huge thing. And Juve had it a tiny bit in the 2000s. And I don't know why teams don't do this more, because I love a middle badge. I think it looks so traditional, it looks organised. It's like the team is at the forefront of the football shirt. I mean, you can't forget the Diodora kits for Roma. I mean, Diodora gets absolutely no love. They're the forgotten stepchild of football boots, and we forget they were a big company in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. You can just imagine Totti in those shirts. I mean, some of them didn't even have sponsors, and for me, I think a sponsor does make the shirt. However, when a team decides to opt out of it for a season or two, I think it can really make the shirt feel something, because sometimes without a sponsor, they could look like a training shirt, and with some sponsors, they take over the entire shirt, so it feels like the advertising is the most prominent thing. Like I say, look at the Juve shirts over the last 5 years with Jeep on it. You just see Jeep, don't you? You don't really see the Juve badge at all. So the Italian League, mainly with the big teams, I think it kept pretty steady. Where I don't think it kept steady was the Premier League. I think we have to split it in two with the Premier League shirts in the 2000s. Early noughties, yeah, brilliant. Late noughties, what was going on with some of these shirts? Let's start with Man United. Dominated in the 90s, but also had very, very iconic shirts. And again, you have to split the two, because were they iconic because Man United were playing really well, or were they iconic because they just look really nice? I say the latter, to be fair, because I love the collar on the shirts, I love the sharp logo, the colour just looked really nice on them. And then, to be fair, they took it into the early 2000s, because I call it the Vodafone era with Man United. It's the later stages of David Beckham. It's when the new boys came in, like Van Nistelrooy, Wayne Rooney came in later on. But saying that, these Vodafone shirts, I'd argue some of them were nicer than the 90s ones. But after the Vodafone era, the AIG era, or AIG, or however you want to spell the sponsor that they had in the late noughties, no chance. That was not a nice shirt at all. The away kit, the home kit, the blue kit was okay. But to me, that is an example of where a shirt just holds good memories for the fans, because they had Cristiano Ronaldo wearing it, they had Wayne Rooney in his prime wearing it, they had Nemanja Vidic, Rio Ferdinand. So of course, a lot of these fans are going to love that shirt. But it was so boring, and the sponsor just looks so basic, didn't it? I'd say the away shirt in 06 was one of the better ones. However, the rest of them just felt generic and unoriginal. And I think this was the change in England, because it went from in the 90s where sponsors were coming onto shirts more and more, but they weren't necessarily local businesses. I mean, Newcastle Brown Ale, that's just a complete outlier of one of the bigger teams, but it had recognisable brands on there, like tech companies or alcohol companies. You know, Sharp for Man United, JVC for Arsenal, Carlsberg for Liverpool. But then in the mid to late 2000s, it just felt like it was airlines, it was banks, it was financial companies that let's face it, what the hell is Standard Chartered? I remember when Liverpool first put that on the shirt, I had no idea what it meant, and then it's, what's it, Bank? AIG, as well for Man United. I only just found out the other day what it is, and I do think this was a time where a lot of teams were getting the same kind of sponsors, weren't they? Chelsea had Fly Emirates, and then Arsenal in the late 2000s had Fly Emirates. And don't get me wrong, teams have had similar sponsors before, but it just felt these billion-pound companies were taking over, which it is what it is. The Premier League became a global institution. But seeing a team like Newcastle going away from Brown Ale to NTL, Northern Rock, it did just felt like the culture was shifting a bit. And it is fun seeing these kind of cool, hip companies, you could say, on the front of football shirts. It's like, what is the best Fiorentina shirts? It's the 7-Up ones, and it's also the Nintendo ones. I mean, even West Ham had Doc Martens on theirs. I also think this was the era in England where Umbro and Reebok probably started to die out. Liverpool, Bolton, Man City, they were all sporting Reebok. Chelsea had Umbro. United at the start of the decade had Umbro. And to be fair, Umbro is still fairly relevant. There's quite a few teams like a Bournemouth, like Ipswich in the Premier League. But I think it's the shift away from where it used to be the biggest teams in England would wear Umbro. What about Spanish kids? I'd say Barca are one of the rare few teams that had better kits in the 2000s than the 90s. That away kit in 2004, if you are a similar age to me, there's one thing that comes to mind with that, and that's Ronaldinho's goal against Chelsea in the Champions League. The early 2000s saw the badge stay in the middle again, which is my preference. But like the Premier League, I think Barca declined a bit in the late 2000s when they went to a bit of a boring design and they had the UNICEF logo on the shirt. But prior to that, I'd say 9, 10 out of 10s for every Barca kit in the 2000s. What about Real Madrid though? And we'll see recently, Real Madrid are releasing their, I believe it's their 99-2000 kit again, with the Tekka sponsor on the front. That is probably, you could argue, their nicest kit of all time. And it's got good memories for a lot of people, because what does the black away kit remind you of? I mean, I was 4 at the time, but even Steve McManaman's goal in the Champions League final. I tell you what, they were lucky they had Galacticos and, you know, good looking blokes like David Beckham wearing these shirts in the 2000s, because some of them were not nice at all, especially when they got the Siemens mobile on there. Are you telling me if Tommy Graventon and Royston Drenthe were wearing those shirts, then they'd be seen as iconic ones? Because I only think it's because Zidane and Ronaldo and Beckham were wearing them. The late 2000s, it's got to remind you maybe of that Dutch takeover at Madrid when Van Nistelrooy came over, Huntelaar, Ian Robben. And then the 2009 one, if it doesn't remind you of Ronaldo's presentation at the Bernabeu, then frankly you're far too young to be watching this channel. Atletico Madrid, as usual, they normally have a nice shirt. I mean, like I say of AC Milan, you've got to put in some effort to mess up a design like that. It's got to remind you of young Sergio Aguero, young Fernando Torres, and then of course that rogue Spider-Man ad they had on the shirt in that season. The Bundesliga, what do we reckon? I think they've pulled it out of the bag a lot more late 2010s, 2020s. For me, a lot of them in the 2000s, they were just boring, weren't they? Saying that, I think I do prefer the Bayern Munich shirts in the 2000s than probably any other era. I like the colours on there. I liked how a lot of the home shirts, sometimes it felt like it was a different team. It has to make you think of Michael Ballack. And for me, that 2001 shirt, which was pre-Ballack, that is their nicest shirt I've seen for Bayern Munich. But I tell you what, I can't forgive what just the world did to those Borussia Dortmund shirts. The 90s, I mean, is there a better run than in the 90s for Borussia Dortmund? That neon yellow colour with the black, it just works so well with the old Nike logo. There's a reason why when they released it for a limited edition in COVID, that it sold out within about 20 minutes. I mean, just compare the one from 96-97 to the one from 2003. It feels like a different team, but not in a good way, like I said with Bayern Munich. What I'll say as a positive, maybe Werder Bremen, they had a pretty cool kit in the late 2000s. Maybe that's just because they had a bit of a cult hero team with Diego, Mesut Ozil, Miroslav Klose. I'd say mainly that 2006 one was definitely the coolest. Before we go on to international to finish this video off, honourable mentions, PSG 2001-2002. That is an iconic shirt, isn't it? Gives you the image of a young JJ Kutcher, maybe Ronaldinho. And for me, it might not be everyone's taste, but I love the Benfica shirts from the late 2000s because it reminds me, and if you know, you know, Pablo Aimar, one of the most underrated attacking midfielders of just the 21st century. But like I say, let's finish on international shirts. And it'd be rude not to talk about England first. We'll go on to the 2002 shirt, which is probably the most iconic of the era because it saw David Beckham score the goal against Greece. I can't find the stats, but I would put a bet on that that's probably the best selling shirt of the decade for England. I just preferred those colours and designs, like the nice navy stripe down the side. The away strip as well is probably the best out of the lot. 2006, I think it holds a lot of memories for people because, I mean, it's probably England's best ever team on paper, wasn't it? With the golden generation. We're not going to go into that. But it was also the first England shirt that I really wanted to get. I think I got Gerrard on the back. 2008 looks like a training kit. Don't even want to know about that. 2004 is an interesting one. Bit of a collar, and it probably reminds you of Wayne Rooney, if you're old enough, at the 2004 Euros. I mean, for me, we love nostalgia, but we also are anti-blinded nostalgia on this channel. I think the 2020s have much nicer shirts than England did in the 2000s and then the 2010s. I'd say positives, Japan 2000. Unreal shirt. Argentina 2000, really like that. Still had hints of the 90s, but was getting a bit more modern. The Brazil 2002 shirts, are they just iconic because they won the World Cup? R9 was brilliant. Yes and no, I think they are nice. I don't think they're the best they've ever created. I do like the blue one, but I think Brazil have had much nicer shirts than that. Portugal's home shirt 2004, that probably has an argument to be maybe the nicest out of the lot of them. They lost to Greece in that, but it saw the emergence of Cristiano Ronaldo in that shirt. I mean, I always liked the 2008 Spanish shirt because one, it was the start of kind of their domination over the next 4 years, and two, I was a massive fan of Fernando Torres, and I had to support someone because England didn't even go to that tournament, did they?
It was inconceivable to us that England wouldn't qualify for the European Championship.
But we can't forget probably the most creative shirt of that era, and that was the Cameroon 2002 shirt. It was sleeveless, it wasn't a shirt, it was a vest. And they weren't allowed to play in the 2002 World Cup in it, but they did play in AFCON in 2004 with it, which I believe they got docked points for the qualification of the next tournament. But in conclusion, the state of football shirts in the 2000s, they were just a bit odd, weren't they? They had some really cool designs, but like I say, I do think the 2010s, which we'll do in another video, it was the dark age of football shirts. I think sponsors became more and more generic with billion-pound companies that a lot of fans, they didn't have a connection to. Kit designs became more and more generic as well. I think they just had templates, and I think Adidas and Nike started to capitalise. They started to have a monopoly over the market, didn't they? And finally, it felt like the fit changed for the first time because it always felt that footballers wore baggy shirts. I mean, I went to the Football Museum in Manchester. Ian Wright wore like a double XL. And I do think baggier shirts just fit people nicer, because we're not even going to discuss that Arsenal and Spurs era when they wore skin-tight shirts in the 2010s. But there's loads of iconic ones, and you'll see so many people wearing them today. Let me know what you think. Let me know your favourite 2000s shirt. Do you think it was a good time? Do you think it was a bad time? Leave a like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. That'd be great. But thanks for watching.